evidenced in practice. First, teachers keep current with developments, new content, new approaches, and changing methods of instructional delivery within their discipline, and we would see that this is evident both in the planning and execution of lessons. Also, teachers demonstrate content-specific pedagogy that meets the needs of diverse learners, utilizing engaging instructional materials to connect prior content knowledge to new learning. Also, teachers make appropriate and authentic connections across disciplines, subjects, and students' real-world experiences. Teachers regularly highlight key concepts and ideas and use them as a basis to connect other powerful ideas. And last but not least, teachers understand how varied types of thinking are applied in classroom lessons and how instruction is structured to provide ongoing opportunities for students to use different types of thinking skills at increasing levels of complexity. When we reflect on these practical connections to teachers' content knowledge and expertise, it's important to think about how teachers are growing and developing in ways that align to the practices that we've seen on these last two slides. Since T-TEST is an evidence-based process, appraisers consistently collect evidence to use in conjunction with a rubric to validate and assess how practices are occurring. The questions on this slide will help the appraiser think globally about how content knowledge and expertise are embedded in what teachers know and do in practice. A first question to consider is, what processes does the grade level, department, and/or school implement to ensure that teachers have extensive content knowledge of all subjects taught, including closely related fields? How are learning objectives and perhaps sub-objectives integrated with other disciplines and grounded in real-world experiences that students can relate to and understand? How do teachers know and anticipate student misunderstandings and proactively address these during instruction? How do teachers expand their expertise of the content in ways that allow them to present the information in multiple differentiated ways so that all students' needs are met? How is instruction sequenced in a way that coherently makes sense to all students? How is thinking modeled and purposefully taught with the expectation that students engage in various types of thinking at higher, complex levels? The content knowledge and expertise dimension includes a specific descriptor related to types of thinking. The descriptor reads, provides opportunities for students to use different types of thinking: analytical, practical, creative, and research-based. The following descriptions further define each type of thinking. For analytical thinking, this is where students analyze, compare, and contrast, and evaluate and explain information. Most teachers focus only on analytical thinking in their classrooms. This type of thinking demands that students analyze, evaluate, and explain phenomena. Analyzing, evaluating, and explaining information is a skill that applies to all disciplines and is critical for an informed and educated society. For practical thinking, this is where students use, apply, and implement what they learned in real-world scenarios. Many students do not often see the connections between what they learn in school and how they can use this knowledge in the real world. Teachers who integrate practical thinking into their teaching design learning activities where students are forced to use and apply concepts and ideas that they learn in real-world scenarios. For creative thinking, this is where students create, design, imagine, and suppose. By teaching students to create, design, and imagine, teachers prepare students for the flexible and creative thinking they will need to exercise later in life. Creative thinking allows students to generate new ideas by bringing together existing ideas in new configurations, developing new possibilities for things that already exist, or discovering or imagining something new. Research-based thinking is where students explore and review a variety of ideas, models, and solutions to problems. In the midst of our information age, students need to know not only how to research to find information, but also how to review a variety of ideas and come to solutions that are well supported and make sense. With this type of thinking, students learn to problem solve, apply critically, evaluate, create, and collaborate, important skills for the 21st century learner and life. These 4 types of thinking are critical to helping students acquire new knowledge and apply these concepts in multiple contexts as noted in the first descriptor of the rubric. So, how do we teach thinking? Here are 4 options to consider. The first option is structuring the learning environment and instructional interactions to facilitate learning new content through thinking. Under structuring, we see that there are clear expectations for how thinking will occur, that thinking happens throughout the school day, across content areas, and over extended periods of time, that there are opportunities for interactions where thinking is the norm. Those interactions may include teacher-to-student interactions and peer-to-peer, and that thinking also is introduced and included in a way that addresses all learning styles. The second way to teach thinking is through responding to students and their learning styles or needs. When we think about responding, we're looking at wait time, allowing students the time to think and process, accepting the thinking without judgment, clarifying when we don't understand the thinking, perhaps by asking follow-up questions or reframing what was said, by providing academic feedback around the thinking, and then empathizing as thinking is happening. The third strategy is through modeling, that there are opportunities for teacher-student interactions through modeling of expected learning outcomes related to thinking, that students are emulating others as a basic way of learning, and also that modeling is occurring, perhaps through a think aloud or other strategies such as think, pair, share, where thinking time is provided to students in very purposeful and structured ways. And then the last strategy to consider is questioning, that we're using questioning as a means to engage students in critical thinking and problem solving. Under questioning, we see that there is higher level questioning that is happening, and we're thinking about Bloom's levels of Bloom's questioning, and that learners must be presented with problems and questions, the answers to which are not apparent, open-ended questions which allow students to truly, authentically engage in thinking and problem solving. In looking at the accomplished and distinguished performance levels of the T-TEST rubric, it's important to think about teachers are supported in moving to student-centered actions. Here are some think-abouts related to content, knowledge, and expertise. First, students use different kinds of thinking, analytical, practical, creative, and research-based, in a way that lead to student-centered, student-led outcomes. For example, solving problems, creating products or projects, researching, and applying information, among other things. Another area to consider in terms of moving from teacher-centered to student-centered actions is The teacher's content and pedagogical knowledge and expertise are extensive. As a result, lessons are designed and executed in a way that facilitate and promote student-centered, student-led lessons. Teachers lead less and facilitate more, with learners taking on the responsibility for organizing content, generating examples, posing and answering questions, and solving problems, among other things. Another way to look at moving towards student-centered actions is that learning is connected and integrated with other disciplines to move towards lessons that are interconnected, student-centered, and student-led. A question becomes, how are teachers purposefully planning in a way that helps move lessons towards more student-centered actions? When we think about content knowledge and expertise, we know that the pre-conference is paramount in helping teachers plan and design lessons that are student-centered, student-led. It is important to think about perhaps some pre-conference questions that will facilitate and move some of those actions towards student-centered, student-led behaviors. We can look at questions from an appraiser and/or teacher point of view. For related to content knowledge and expertise, following the lesson, the post-conference will help guide teachers' reflection about how content knowledge and expertise manifested itself before and during the lesson. Potential questions to include are the following. In what ways was the content organized and sequenced to build on students' prior knowledge and promote complex, higher-order thinking? During the lesson, how did you formatively assess gaps in student knowledge, misconceptions, and/or preconceptions? What were the results? What were the cross-disciplinary and real-world connections, and how were these communicated and supported? And last, how were students provided opportunities to engage in individual and collaborative thinking and problem solving? How might this have been extended? These are just 4 of many post-conference sample questions, some of which are included in the T-TESS Appraiser Handbook, and others where the rubric may be used to take each one of those descriptors and turn them around into questions that promote thinking and reflection around each of those practices in the rubric for content knowledge and expertise. The goal, as we know, is to ask questions of teachers in a way that helps the teacher purposefully reflect on how content knowledge and expertise is guiding teaching and learning practices.